and thank you for joining us on Labor Lens. Today's show is full of interesting packages. We will be focusing on minimum wage and we'll bring to you job openings across the country and more. I am Sharon Ichason.
The National Union of Banks, Insurance and Financial Institutes has called on workers in the banking sector to unionize. This call came after the delegates' conference which was held in Lagos recently. According to the president of the union, Comrade Danjuma Musa, to ensure minimal loss of job and professionalism in the sector, it is essential for workers to unionize.
We have had so many challenges over a period of time, but again, we have also decided and discovered that without we coming together as a union to propel and then to see things in the right direction, there's no way, all those things we're mentioning, ranging from fighting in-house and externally, will, take shape.
The Kogi State chapters of the Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress declared an indefinite strike over unpaid salaries. This is coming just as the National Union of Local Government Employees also issued a 7-day ultimatum within which they would also embark on an indefinite strike if government fails to meet with their demands. The chairman of the union, Ono Edoka, says the workers' demands are the full payment of all salary arrears owed workers, stoppage of the clock-in, clock-out system, which according to him is aimed at casualizing workers. Aviation workers under the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria held a protest in Lagos recently to register their displeasure over the federal government plan to concession major airports in the country. The Air Transport Services Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, the National Union of Air Transport Employees, and Nigerian Union of Pensioners gathered at FAN's premises in Lagos. According to the labor leaders, if FAN is independent, it has all it takes to maintain the airports and their facilities. Other stakeholders who attended the protest were of the view that if concessioning must take place, it must follow strict legal and legislative framework, which must go through the National Assembly and have fundamental laws that will guide it.
Adebimpe Onolapo is a teacher at a school in Ketu, Lagos. She has been working as a teacher for more than 5 years. She tells me her salary is 18,000 naira monthly. That's about $50 US. In my desire to understand how a person survives on less than $2 per day, we set up our camera and set out with Adebimpe from her house to the bus stop where she takes a bus to Ketu, Lagos. At this point, she pleaded anonymity, and so we agreed to keep her face out of the picture as much as possible. For Adebimpe, the routine of every typical workday involves deploying a marker on a board to impact lives and earn a living for herself. After the day's job, we visited her home in Ibafu. She narrates to us how she manages 18,000 naira with 2 children who have to be fed, clothed, and attend school.
I earn close to 18,000 in a month.
Okay, and is that sufficient for you?
It's not sufficient for me. I'm just managing it.
Okay, so generally, if I may ask, are you married and do you have children?
Yes, I'm married with 2 kids.
How is it been generally in terms of faring for them?
It's not easy for me. For the past 3 years now, I've been managing their school fees. I have to pay their school fees, but though my husband is supporting in that aspect, their food, they have to eat. Maybe in a month, I have to look for what they will eat. Like, I spend close to 8,000 in a month for the house rent.
Okay, but how much do you spend when it comes to the house rent on a daily do you pay on a monthly basis or on a yearly basis?
I paid monthly basis.
And how much do you pay?
Like, okay, 2,000 in a month.
Okay, so you pay 2,000 naira
In a month.
Okay, so that would be times 12. Do you pay that fully or your husband supports with that?
My husband too do support, but sometimes he do support.
Okay, so you pay 2,000 naira on a monthly basis.
Yes.
Okay. So can you explain, has there been any time that probably you've had issues with the landlord because you're not meeting up with the rent?
Yes.
Can you tell me that story? With the high rate of inflation in the country, I asked Adegbimpe how she is able to cope with house rent and electricity bills.
We use Jane, so sometimes we own Jane. We buy fuel to charge our phones, stuff like that. But the Jane we buy every day, and it's not enough. We have to manage ourselves. Just for out of that 18,000 I'm collecting. It's not easy.
Adebimpe Onoluwapo, who is a teacher in a private school, just like any other worker in the country, will receive a similar amount as salary, is hopeful that the government will consider an upward review of the minimum wage and make life more meaningful for the Nigerian worker. Here is the graphical representation of the expense made by Adegbimpe every day and what it comes to at the end of the month. The obvious question is, where does she get the balance? The likely answer could mean that every day for Adegbimpe yields a miracle.
The present day reality, no. It is really not at all. You can't even, how are you going to do it? Even within a month, you would have expended that on just only on transportation. Even it depends on where you work. If somebody is, take Lagos for example, probably you are living in maybe Ikorodu, and you work in somewhere in Ireland. Under 2 weeks, you will have expended the 18,000 minimum. You are not talking about school fees for your kids. You're not even talking about feeding. You're not talking about other social amenities that you have to pay. In fact, if it was when the naira was a little bit valuable, where you have about 190, 150 to $1, it could make sense. We are talking about something about 360 naira to $1. No. Even if it is increased to 50,000, it cannot even take anybody home. At least we're talking about an average family. An average family, you talk about the husband and wife, maybe about 3 children. It can never, and it is hard time that those that are responsible for the upward review of the minimum wage get cracking, because the more it stays, the more it delays, the more workers get frustrated.
Depending on the state where you are from, and that's why when people talk about restructuring, these are areas that we need to restructure in terms of the minimum wage. I don't see why Lagos State minimum wage should be like that of Kebbi State. Are you with me? So, depending on where you are from, the house rent in Lagos cannot. If you pay somebody in Lagos State 120,000 and you pay somebody in Kebbi State 120,000, comparatively, even the person in Kebbi is even earning much more than someone in Lagos. So, first and foremost, 18,000 is not enough. Considering current realities, 18,000 is not enough. However, when we want to restructure the issue of minimum wage, let each state pay according to its own capacity and according to prevailing market condition. And that will solve the problem. Other than expecting us to have a national minimum wage, there's no way it is done anywhere in the world. And I stand to be corrected on that. Doctors don't earn the same amount of money in United States of America. It varies depending on the state where you are working, and that comes into the narrative of restructuring which we are talking about. Let each state pay according to its capacity, but the minimum wage should be enough to put food on the table, clothes on the body, and shelter over the body, and take care of the basic needs of the people.
One union the Nigerian government dreads to go on strike is NUPENG. When its members down tools, Nigerians pay the painful price. We would like to know what the union is doing to address the issue of minimum wage. I'll be discussing with the president of the union, Comrade Igwe Achese, who is also the deputy president of the United Labour Congress. Join me.
Hello, Sharon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You're welcome.
Thank you. We will be discussing minimum wage on this episode, and from my findings, Nigerian government approved 18,000 naira as the minimum wage in 2011. 6 years after, Nigerians are still receiving 18,000 naira, and from my research, it shows us that we've already had inflation, about 16% inflation, if I'm correct, after this minimum wage has been actually set up since 2011. I would like to ask you, as a Labour leader, what do you feel about this development? With this inflation, do you think that this 18,000 naira can take any Nigerian home?
Well, Sharon, thanks for that wonderful question. That has been a serious concern in the working environment today. Very, very sad to see that 6 years down the line, we're still at 18,000 minimum wage, which is not up to. If you divide that by about 25, 28, 26 days of working, you will understand that the Nigerian worker who works in a day earns less than $1 today as it is now. So it's sad that we find that less than $2 per day. And that is how painful it is. The minimum wage today is not sustainable. You just mentioned the issues of the inflation. It was about 17%. I think it's gradually coming down a little bit to 16.5, if I'm not wrong, 16.7 thereabout. Now, today as it stands, no family, a working family of 5, or even a working family of 3, can survive the current economic situation of finance. Those are economic realities. And so we want to believe that 18,000 minimum wage cannot sustain any longer. Inflation is very high. Nigerians are suffering. And so we hope government, should be able to bounce back and see how we can move forward.
Okay, the Federal Government Executive Council has announced recently that they've inaugurated the Minimum Wage Commission. But also we are aware that it's been approved that a technical committee should be set up, and we have the committee. But I'd like to ask you, has it been inaugurated at the moment? And if it's not been inaugurated as we speak, what would you say the government is trying to do in terms of achieving that workers' minimum wage is being improved upon? Would you say that the Nigerian government is paying lip service to the Nigerian worker, especially when it comes to the minimum wage issue that we are faced with?
On the 22nd, we got information that the Minimum Wage Commission has been inaugurated. The other side of the Minimum Wage Commission is that 2 current labor centers are not represented in that commission, which is the TUC and the New Labor Center, ULC. NLC is quite represented. Issa Ramo is a member of that committee. Prior to that inauguration of the committee, a technical committee was being set up late last year, should I say early last year, to look into profiling basis of what new minimum wage should look like, putting into cognizance all the criteria and all the various indices that is needed. And so we worked on that issues. I'll say, I think in June or July, the technical committee rounded up her report and submitted that also to the acting chairman of the technical committee, which is the Minister of Labour. We had a series of meetings. In that meeting, the Minister of Finance was there, Minister of Budget and Planning. They all made presentations, which we looked at all the whole issues. Fine. At the minimum wage level, for us, NLC presented 56,000 naira as a minimum wage, and we said that it's not sustainable. For ULC had a position of 90,000 naira for minimum wage, which we still believe that is still not sustainable when you talk about living wage for any Nigerian worker today in the country. But we said, let's take it up a little bit, at least because sometimes you begin to ask yourself the percentage of increment, when you just shoot it up in one whole moment, how the reflection or reactions will look like. So let's take it a step forward. But fine, the technical committee had done her job. The negotiating council, the minimum wage negotiation is yet to be inaugurated. Like if you watch last week, where ULC also embarked on the 3 days strike action, but that was later suspended because of the interventions of the Director SSS, Minister of Petroleum, Minister of Petroleum, Minister of Labour, and Power and Steel. So, which we need to go into having more broader meetings. We've been nominated also. ULC has also been nominated to be a member of the negotiating council. At least we have gotten a slot.
And you are serving under that? I'm
also serving on that committee. Now, the committee for negotiation is yet to commence her job. We hope strongly, is every hope of Nigerian worker today to say, look, by the time we get into the main negotiating council board, that will be able to drive home the whole ideas of increasing our minimum wage beyond 18,000 naira that we're having today. We're looking at getting something huge because why are we having inflation in the country today? Because the purchasing power is very poor. So until we develop that purchasing power that can also compete with the market demand, we'll continue to remain where we are in terms of recession.
Well said. But if we are going to look at it, we are talking of raising the bar when it comes to minimum wage. But we also have so many states that are not even paying workers' salary. How would you take this as a labor leader? Do you think the sensitization process should take place when it comes to good governance? Or what would you think could be done to ensure that Nigerian workers actually have a living wage and are not being owed salaries?
Let me be honest to you, Sharon. It's very unfortunate we find ourselves in this kind of situation. I think we need to redefine our way of governance as long as the country is concerned. We need to restructure our approach to issues. I'll tell you some of the challenges we are facing today in terms of non-payment of salaries and arises from most of those in governance, talking about from the government, the governors, the presidency, go down to the tier of governance where we find ourselves at the local government, is placement of priorities. That is where we're having the problem. Now, you can't imagine a situation where a local government chairman will be talking about security vote that is unaccountable. A state governor is talking about security vote that is also not accountable. At the federal level, again, it's also talking about security vote that's also not accountable. Now, tell me why Nigerian workers will not be owed their salaries, who has sacrificed so much to generate the revenue equation that is being mismanaged or misplaced or misappropriated as expected. Now, for me, we can only get it right. No governor, no local government worker should be owed. No governor should owe a local government, or even the least local government worker should be owed. No local government chairman should say he can't pay his local government workers. So the issue is priority, The issue is things of importance that should be placed first. And the key thing of importance is to place first the workers' rights and privileges, which is their salary. Of course, if a country wants to pull out of recession, you must begin to talk about payment of Nigerian workers' salaries as a country today. So that is where we find ourselves. So no government will say vividly, if sitting down in governance council where you find yourself as a governor and that you prioritize your choice of expenditure, that you cannot pay workers' salary. None. No governor can get up and say, I cannot pay my workers. And so a situation where governors will begin to be a businessman, a local government chairman will become a businessman, in going to borrow money from banks above your income in a state, borrowing money to say you want to put infrastructures. If you prioritize them and begin to look at time frame, budget frame, and look at the length of period you think one project can take, if we do that, definitely, I'll tell you, we'll put infrastructures on ground. Workers will be so happy to pay for those infrastructures that they are seeing. Incomes will come, more development will not take place. So we need to begin to differentiate these issues. Until we get to that level, I'll tell you, governors will continue to play the role they are playing. And so for me, no governor in this country will say, I can't pay my workers if we actually prioritize the issues. Now, go down into the records and find out how much, let me just use how much is being expended by a governor on security. Now, even if you divide that money time by 3 and say you're taking 2 portions into minimum wage, into salary and wages of Nigerian workers, I'm telling you, definitely we're going to get our system clear. But I think everybody must work must put his hands on deck to work. Everybody must begin to ask ourselves what is the best way to approach some of these issues and challenges that we're having. But I tell you, today as it stands, the Nigerian workers are paying the ultimate painful price.
Finally, I would like to ask, would you say that the emergence of a new labor center would affect the negotiation as regards the review of the new minimum wage?
Of course it will not. The system remains permanent, when you talk about a new labor center, it has nothing to come and change overnight. Talked about the act that established the minimum wage commission won't change. We talk about the current minimum wage we're having today, or in terms of going into negotiation, won't still change. The same models of negotiation is going to still take place. But the new labor center only came in to say, look, we need to restore back hope to the Nigerian workers. At a certain point, we discovered that Nigerian workers were losing this confidence on the labor movement of the that was built on its so strong foundations from their founding fathers. Now, our new labor center, ULC, is to create that enabling environment to give voice back to Nigerian workers to say you can also speak. You can also say something in terms of your welfare, in terms of how you feel. It's not an issue of one group of individuals going to do negotiation for workers. I'll tell you, today in the oil and gas sector, we don't just go and sit down and negotiate for workers without the workers' representatives themselves being part of that negotiation. And so you can see the structure of our democratic principle in our own system. And so that's what we're also building the new USC, that in every meeting, like the recent meeting that was called by the minister in terms of the enlarged meeting to address some of the issues that were put forward under ULC, we requested, one, all unions whose issues were mentioned in our letter to government must participate in the meeting and also sit there broadly to discuss, present their issues as it is in their sector. And then while we send, the labor center begin to take it up to address them with the government. But they must be there to also put in their input and also address issues as regards to the demands and the rest of it. So that is what the new labor center is pushing forward. And that is the principle of labor democracy that we all know globally that works.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Sharon.
And it's a wrap on today's episode of Labor Lens. Join us same time, same station for a fresh edition of Labor Lens. Remember, labor creates wealth. I am Sharon Jason. Thanks for watching.